In the dark of night and from a hidden bunker deep in the subterranean bowels of the Senate emerged a bill misnamed the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, S. 1348. Incredibly, it was defeated, or so we thought. In a move of Transylvanian proportions, this bill has returned to haunt us anew. Today's topic is the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services Bureau of Homeland Security, and why that immigration bureaucracy cannot, will not, and does not intend to administer the current law and has neither the wherewithal nor any interest in implementing the vast array of nooks, crannies, loopholes, and indigestibles in this proposed legislation. USCIS is the benefits side of the immigration house, the welfare side. This is the side that believes that immigration benefits are an entitlement, not a privilege. It appears that immigration law, the newcomer's first encounter with our vaunted rule of law, is a set of facades. Knock one down, and there is nothingness as far as the eye can see. We are honored today to have a cast of immigration reform heroes to discuss this issue. Ed Royce was concerned about illegal immigration when it wasn't cool. Ed is in his eighth term representing California's 40th Congressional District. He serves on the Financial Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, where he is the ranking member of the Terrorism, Nonproliferation and Trade Subcommittee. He is a strong voice for smaller government and a vocal and dependable supporter of enforcement-only immigration reform. He was one of the earliest members of Tom Tancredo's Immigration Reform Caucus.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction here, and let me mention that I'm the ranking member on the International Terrorism Subcommittee, and in the last session I chaired that particular committee. And as a consequence of investigations that we held and hearings that we held on the border and hearings that we held in Washington, D.C. with people like Maxwell, but I'll mention that we had literally dozens of conversations with not only Border Patrol agents, but with USCIS employees. And basically it is USCIS that would be in charge of the guest worker program, of the amnesty program, and they would not, in the views of those that work in the agency, be able to handle the additional millions of cases that they would be getting. They have no functioning law enforcement component to adequately prevent fraud and corruption. And in my discussions with Border Patrol agents, for those of you that have watched the response to this bill by the men and women who actually have the responsibility of implementing, should this become law, implementing this policy, you can get a flavor for what Border Patrol agents feel. Unrealistic and technologically unfeasible is the quote from the National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers, who say that this would lead to chaos in their view. They say this legislation is insultingly, unforgivingly bad. Well, why do we get this kind of response from the people on the line whose job it is to implement these policies? I think it is because they realize that if we fail to wake up to the reality of what lax enforcement at our borders and of our immigration laws is doing, we are doomed to put our homeland at further risk. And I think they realize that the USCIS is in just as bad a shape as INS was to handle any increase in caseload. They say because fraud is rampant, cutting corners is the routine in the agency. It is far too late under this measure for the agency to gear up for this kind of workload, because right now each employee must undergo a background check, for example, to work there at the agency, to to obtain a security clearance, to access the necessary terrorist and criminal databases that every new applicant must be checked against, and that system isn't functioning. Our immigration system, in short, is broken, and we ought to start by fixing the system first before we add tens of millions of cases to it. Now, various journalists, George Well for one, has looked at some of the other consequences of this kind of legislation. One point he makes is what is to prevent those who arrive here in the United States since January 1st and will continue to arrive, in his words, by the millions, while the border is supposedly being secured, from fibbing about when they arrived. So we are not only talking about, let's say, 12 million cases. We are talking going forward, given the level of document fraud that USCIS is discovering, given that level of document fraud, we are talking about millions and millions of individuals coming into the U.S. And there is a problem, because some of the people coming into the United States, like Mahmoud Karani, who came in the trunk of a car over the border with Mexico, are in fact terrorists. He was a member of Hezbollah. As a matter of fact, he was the brother of the Hezbollah general in charge of the rocketing attacks in southern Lebanon. He is now serving time in federal penitentiary, along with many of his colleagues who were subsequently caught. Part of the problem here, according to Janice Geppert, who was on the staff of the 9/11 Commission and looked at the immigration histories of 94 terrorists, including 6 of the 9/11 hijackers, who operated here in the United States in the 1990s through 2004. This was her conclusion. 2/3 of the foreign-born terrorists studied committed immigration benefits fraud prior to or in conjunction with taking part in terrorist activity here in the United States. Many committed multiple immigration violations. So we basically have a system that is broken. We have a system where we've crippled background checks, and we're going to do it. We're going to continue to cripple them with this legislation. Under Section 601, the government has only 1 business day to conduct a background check. Unless the government can find a reason not to grant a visa, the alien receives one. The problem is there is no single readily searchable database of all dangerous people in the world, obviously. So much of this kind of information exists in paper records that can't be researched in 24 hours. And so what is the lesson we draw? The lesson we draw on the need for effective background checks is the lesson of Mahmoud Abu Lima. And look what happened as a result of the 1986 law. He sought and obtained amnesty fraudulently for seasonal agricultural work. He was actually in this country to plan an attack, the first attack on the World Trade Center. He used his legal status to travel abroad for terrorist training and lead the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. We know we have terrorists operating in the United States. Now is not the time to give them the opportunity to create fraudulent identity with ease. Because in the past, in 1986, when it happened, the result was an attack. How many attacks will come if we don't use a rational policy, secure our borders first, fix our broken immigration system, rather than go down this road of mass amnesty? I appreciate very much the opportunity to speak today, and I thank you for including me on this panel.